feel really blessed to be here with you. It's my first time at this conference, and so I'm really looking forward to, after this talk is over, and I can spend the next 2 days really just being together with you and learning together with you. I thought I'd dive just right into the presentation and start by telling you a little bit about the organization I'm from and what we do, just so you know kind of where I'm coming from. And then I'm going to focus a little bit on one strand of work that we do in particular that I've actually never presented on before. So this is totally new. So I come from a group called Institute of Play. Institute of Play has been around for about 6 years. It's about 40 people now, spread across 3 offices on 2 coasts. The people who work there a third of the people are sort of designer types, so game designers, interactive designers, visual designers. A third of the people have a background in education, some kind of learning, teachers, curriculum designers, ex-administrators. And a third of the people are a sort of mixed category, fugitives from business, like myself, people who have worked in other nonprofit settings. Institute of Play is a nonprofit, and it has roots in game design. So it was started by a group of game designers who were doing work in commercial game design, and felt like game design, the principles that underlie it, had something to tell other fields as well. And so the first field that those game designers got involved in was education. And so currently at the Institute, the work that we do is spread across 3 areas of focus. And I'm just going to talk really quickly about them. And I'm happy to talk in greater depth about any of them offline after the presentation, because time is quite short. The first project that we got involved in was a project with a school. We had an opportunity to actually redesign a school, kind of reimagine the experience of school. And it eventually became a public school in New York City called Quest to Learn. If you were here at this conference a couple years ago, one of my colleagues, Katie Salen, talked quite in depth about the work in that school. The problem that school was trying to solve for was really a problem around engagement. In this country, about a third of our young people are not graduating high school. And the place where they tend to check out of the system is in middle school. So the school opened as a middle school with the intention of trying to make school an engaging place that young people actually wanted to be. So the school took as its kind of founding premise, how do we look at what makes games really engaging as systems, and how do we translate that into the experience of school? And how do we look at all of those things that young people naturally gravitate towards, whether it's Harry Potter or hip hop or mobile phones or social networks or skateboarding or surfing, whatever it might be? How do we see those things not as obstacles to learning, but as really important contexts for learning that we can design? So the school is not a place where young people are playing video games all day. It's not a place where even technology is necessarily central. It is a place that really just tries to create the highest level of engagement possible for young people, and in fact for all of the people who participate in that learning community. So the second area of work that the Institute got involved in is a project called Glass Lab. It's about 1.5 years old. It grew, everything we've done at the Institute has sort of grown out of the work that we do with schools. And Glass Lab is all about reimagining assessment, how assessment happens in an educational environment. We all know how much assessment happens in educational environments today. Most of the assessments that happen look at assessment as a kind of problem of information. So they're pretty good at looking in a young person's mind at any one moment in time at the facts, figures, information that might be there, and then assessing the quality of those things. The problem is we know that that's actually doesn't tell us very much about how successful a young person will be once they leave the school environment, which is the ultimate goal of education. So we wondered whether there's a different way to do assessment. And we wondered whether digital games could serve as the kind of basis for that new form of assessment. If you think about it, what's so compelling about a digital game in this context is that it's a little world. And we wonder, can we drop a player into that world and actually start to learn something about the kinds of choices they make in that world, and based on those choices, start to build inferences about what they might be learning or what they might not be learning. So it's no longer about information, it's about choice. We brought together, because we don't have the expertise to do that kind of work, we brought together some really strong partners to do that work. We have providing the video game IP companies like Electronic Arts, who have been generous enough to actually let us work with real video game IP that kids are already playing. We brought together the educational testing service to provide the assessment expertise. There's a small group within Pearson that's helping us work on questions of big data. How do we put these incredibly sophisticated software systems, data systems that sit behind these games actually in service of student learning and of improved instruction. So what you're seeing now is the first assessment product that we created and just released last week. We're actually announcing it at an event in DC today. And it is a modification of SimCity, so an incredibly sophisticated simulation that we've sort of built challenges on top of and surrounded with different kinds of classroom materials that will make it actually useful as a learning environment in a middle school setting. And so here the particular challenge that this player is playing through is a challenge where they've been asked to balance the need to create more jobs with the need to reduce air pollution within an urban environment. And there's all sorts of data tools they can click into, and there's tools that surround it, kind of systems mapping tools, essay writing tools, different things to engage them in different ways. And all of these sort of game-based learning and assessment environments that we're building are aligned to the new standards that are coming out, the Common Core standards. They're also aligned to some next-gen standards. And that's kind of the stuff we have to do. But they're also looking at what are commonly referred to as 21st century skills. So 21st century skills tend to be things like systems thinking, design thinking, collaboration, persistence, past failure, empathy, and those sorts of things. As people who have created and operate schools, we know are super important. So these assessments are actually also trying to figure out how do we measure those things, and how do we give teachers a window into those things, how students are progressing against them. Okay, so that's the second area of work. The third area of work is just now starting to emerge. Here we were doing this work in schools, doing this work with learning more broadly, and it was getting quite a lot of press. And so we suddenly had people coming to us that weren't from those worlds. We had business people coming to us, people from cultural institutions, government people. And it was quite a surprise, didn't expect that. And all of them seemed to look at the work we were doing as answering an engagement problem which was analogous to problems that they themselves were facing. And so wondered whether what we were doing might have something to offer them. So it caused us to kind of look at the work that we were doing and think about how could we actually package this, translate this to be useful to someone else. The image you're seeing is some work we did this summer with some teachers in Pittsburgh. So that this sort of new emerging area is what I'm going to try to talk about today. And first, I'm going to review a little bit about games, why games are interesting. So the first reason games are interesting to the work that we do is that they're dynamic systems. And they're systems that have been intentionally designed to give rise to play. And play is a pretty interesting thing. It's really hard to describe, but somehow we all know it when we're in it. It's somehow set apart from everyday life, and within the state of play, we find permissions, powers that we might not otherwise have access to. So when people are playing, you see them taking risks that otherwise might be totally outlandish in their everyday life. You see a great release of energy. You see creativity you often don't see in so-called normal life. So there's something very special about games as systems because they give rise to play. There's also people who would argue that games are special because they are actually systems which engender learning. If you think about what we've discovered in the last 30, 50 years about what makes a good learning environment, and what we know from game designers makes a good engaging game, there's almost a one-to-one correlation between those two things, which is really interesting. If you think about a game is really just a problem space. It's a space you go into to engage with certain kinds of problems. And everything is really clear about those problems. There's a clear goal, there are clear expectations, there's clear rules of operation. And in really well-designed games, those problems have actually been leveled or scaffolded in a way that takes you from sort of novice level to master level, step by step. And you know when you finish a level that you've actually mastered what you need to know to finish that level. That sounds like a really good learning environment, actually. Games are also really great at using data to provide feedback to the player moving through the experience. Again, a characteristic of a good learning environment. In games, pacing is flexible, so you can actually work at your own pace, and the pathways towards mastery, towards that big goal, are multiple. So there's different entry points for different people, different pathways through the system. And in multiplayer environments, you actually have the games designed in such a way where players become activated as resources for one another. And we know that some of the most powerful learning happens when one is actually required to teach what one has learned. So mentoring situations arise naturally in games. So from a player's perspective, from the perspective of being inside a game, these things are already kind of interesting as systems. And it turns out they're also interesting as systems when you think about designing them. And that tends to be the level that we work on when we work with people outside of the field of education. So the people we've tended to work with outside of education tend to think of themselves as making things. We've worked with people who make products, cars, consumer goods. We worked with people who design programs within cultural institutions, within government agencies. We work with people who think of themselves as designing services, making services. It can be anything, but what all of these people share is the idea that they're making something, and there's kind of a world out there, and once they've made it, they kind of put it out there. And there are different ways that they have for getting feedback from that world or that audience, but the focus is on the thing itself. And if you think about a game, where does a game exist? You know, what is the thing that we refer to when we talk about a game? Is it the pieces you use to play the game? Probably not, no. If you're talking about a digital game, is it this sort of shiny, flickering surface that we're seeing as we're playing the game? No, probably not. You know, is it the acres of code or the rule book that you have to read to understand how to play the game? No, it's not that either. All of these things are the game, and yet the game only really exists when you put people in the mix, and they start to interact with all those things. And the state of play starts to emerge from the structure of the game. So if you look at what a game is, if you had to sort of map what it looks like, it kind of just looks like that, right? It's an open space. It's contiguous with space around it, but somehow different. It's, in the spirit of this conference, a container, really. And it has very clear definition. You know, you might add some things to it, some different kinds of resources that players can use. You might arrange those in very particular ways. But in fact, all of that work of making this thing called a game is actually just a hypothesis, because you don't know what it is until it's activated by people. So then you have to invite the people in to actually experience what it is you've made. And chances are you will see something you didn't expect at all, and you'll have to totally rework what you were thinking. So the movement from thinking of yourselves as making a thing toward thinking of yourself as making a space for possibility, making a game, turns out it's a really kind of transformative movement for the people that we've worked with. And although 95% of those people don't go on to design games, they continue making whatever it is they are making, somehow the focus through this work has shifted for them. And they start to think of that thing less as a thing and more as a space that actually can give rise to a variety of interactions. And they become more concerned with those interactions than they are with the thing itself. That's very interesting. This is a common reaction we've gotten from groups that we work with who come to us, because there's a lot of talk about game design and games and gamification. And so they have something that they've designed, some kind of a system, and then they sort of think, oh, we're going to go to these people, and they'll just kind of put a layer on top. They'll put a point system on top. And people, because of that, will like it more. And then we start to do this work together with them, and they sort of they tend to throw away everything they've made and realize they kind of have to start from scratch again. And that's a good thing, that they don't experience that as a bad thing necessarily. So I thought I would share with you a little video that we made about what this work kind of looks like. It's a video, so you can only see so much. But we did some work with the Museum of Modern Art, and I'll just share with you the video that we made during that.
3, 2, 1,
The Institute of Play organized a 3-day workshop for the staff at the Museum of Modern Art called Play at MoMA. We've been exploring the idea of what games are, how they're made, and how we can use the process to speak to our learning practices at the museum.
It was great because it allowed people to innovate in a kind of a situation that didn't seem high stakes, because the tone of it was about games, and we tend to think of games as being more leisure activity than work activity. I think it made it easier.
Game design is about doing, not about saying you're going to do it. Unfortunately, we are trained to constantly get paralyzed by always concocting ideas and wondering whether they're going to work.
The play testing, I think, is really important. I think that's an important stage for people to realize that it doesn't have to be workable out of the box, that one can bring together a group of people to really work through a process of testing and retesting and trying things differently. I think often we're in such a race to get to the finish line that we miss some of the great opportunities along the way.
If we can look at the process of building a game, starting with one thing and then building on that, it will change the way that we look at development.
There's a kind of trajectory that we realized was kind of common.
I didn't know I had a ninja within me.
And it looks something like this. Whenever we start working with people, we really just start them playing with something. Anything, really. In this case, they were playing with you saw them playing with all different kinds of games, digital games, physical games. And then from there, start to invite them into a kind of critical awareness of the systems that they've entered into through these games. And from there, it's a small step to get them to think about, okay, if this system gave me this experience and I want this experience, what do I have to modify to get that? And then from there, it's a small step to take them into actually designing from scratch. And this way of working is something we really discovered in working with young people. Games are interesting for all the reasons I've said already, but they're also interesting just because they're little systems, and they're little systems that occur in a kind of non-threatening language that most people have some kind of connection to, which is play. So there's something you can get people into really quite easily and sort of take them through a learning trajectory through those games. So just to show you where the MoMA people ended up, again, they ended up at a very simple place, a paper-based game that has a 2-player version and a 3+ player version that anyone can pick up as they enter the museum. And it wasn't a super complex computer system. It was very simple. And what you saw when people started to play this game is that it actually invited them into a different relationship to the space that they were in, the gallery space, and also a different relationship to the activity of viewing art. So what you started to see was the kind of reverential treatment of the gallery that is often common, and especially modern museums of art, become something that looked quite different. Groups of people working together around something, couples sort of releasing a lot of energy, and that, for them, for the people who work there, is a kind of first step, to see what those possibilities might be. And then from there they can build. They can build on that very simple interaction and make something more complex, realized through digital systems or whatever they're looking to do. So we've done this work with a bunch of different people in a consultative setting. We're only 40 people, we can only do so much of that. So we've been experimenting recently with how we get this work out at a larger scale. And one of the ways we've started to do that is to make some digital platforms. This one is called GameKit. We just released it on beta. And it's really just a set of design challenges. And right now it's really just four or six design challenges that start people that are intended for novices to this sort of thinking, to get them sort of into it. And we're building more of these challenges with partners in the museums, partners, English teachers, another group we're working with. So hopefully over time you'll see more of these challenges develop that are specific to different areas of endeavor. So thank you for listening. And if anyone is interested in this, I'm happy to talk about it here, or you can always contact me through any of these methods.